Okay, so here's a little secret about Mapo Tofu, one of Sichuan's most famous dishes. Real, actual people in Sichuan, they don't ever make it at home. My own grandparents who were born and raised in rural Sichuan, they certainly have never made a Mapo Tofu at home. That's because true Mapo Tofu is a restaurant dish. Sure, it's unbelievably delicious, but it's also intensely oily, really salty, and quite spicy. Not something you want to be eating every single day. Hey everyone, I'm Sheldo. Welcome to my kitchen. Over the years, I've come to develop my own version of home-style Mapo Tofu that still captures the spirit of the original while being much more suited to home cooking. Today, I'll show you how to make both versions. First, we'll make an authentic restaurant-style Mapo Tofu. After all, you gotta know the rules before you can break them. Then I'll get into my own version that I cook at least on a weekly basis. We're making Mapo Tofu two ways: authentic versus realistic. Aside from the tofu, just two ingredients form the heart and soul of Mapo Tofu: Sichuan peppercorn and chili bean paste. Together, they create the Ma La flavor profile, which is absolutely quintessential of Sichuanese cuisine. And those are actually the characters on my wall. So Ma stands for numbing, which comes from the Sichuan peppercorn, and La stands for heat or spice, which comes from the chilies. Out of the two core ingredients, Sichuan peppercorn is my only non-negotiable. It cannot be substituted in Mapo Tofu. Without the numbing sensation and the citrusy, piney aroma, you're just not making Mapo Tofu anymore. Sichuan peppercorn is best stored in its whole form. Toasting really brings out its flavor. To toast, it's really simple. Dry pan over medium heat, stirring constantly, just for a few minutes until you can really smell the fragrance of the peppercorn. Then grind into a fine powder using either a mortar and pestle or an electric spice grinder. Chili bean paste is a fermented mix of broad beans and chilies. It's salty, funky, umami, and a little bit spicy. For Sichuanese cooking, we particularly need Pixian doubanjiang, also known as chili bean paste from the Pixian area in Sichuan. To know that you're getting actual Pixian chili bean paste, look for these characters on your package. At the store, you'll find chili bean paste in two forms. Most commonly, you'll see it in the jar, which has the red oil. This is a slightly younger form. It has really nice, beautiful red color. The other version comes in a different package. It's drier and more fermented, darker, funkier, and has a ton of depth of flavor. For me at home, I actually buy both and use them for different purposes. For Mapo Tofu, I like to combine the two, so I get the color of the younger one and the depth of flavor of the older one. The skin can be quite fibrous. So my preference is to just take a stick blender and make the whole thing smooth. Just want to break up the large chunks of chili skin. With these two prepped, I'm good to go in terms of chili bean paste for at least a year, if not longer. Just chuck them in the fridge. There's so much salt in them, they won't go bad. It's just after a year or so, the flavor starts to decline. So really for Mapo Tofu, because it's such a simple dish with only a few ingredients, you probably shouldn't try to substitute the chili bean paste. However, if you're in a pinch, I've found that actually you can get pretty darn close with a mix of a fermented soybean product and a chili product. I like to use Korean doenjang with Indonesian sambal olek. That way you get the fermented funkiness from the soybean and then that spicy, fruity chili note from the chili product. For the tofu, we'll want to use a medium firm, soft tofu. So none of that extra firm or like dry pressed tofu. We want a soft, fresh tofu, but no silken or extra soft tofu because you'll end up making a tofu mash. I've scaled this recipe around a pound of tofu for our American friends, though if you're Canadian like me, they'll usually come in a 700-gram package. To use the recipe, just scale up the ingredients by 1.5 times. And with the tofu, we'll just cut them into roughly inch cube. Doesn't have to be perfect. For the scallion, just cut them into inch or so. For Mapo Tofu, the scallion will actually act as more of a vegetable, less of a garnish. And then mince some garlic, just 2 cloves, give it a smack first. Make it really easy to peel, and then just give it a fine mince. Last thing to chop, douchi or fermented black beans. So these will usually come vacuum packed. Every time you use them, it's best to actually rinse them off and drain. That gets off the excess salt that's on the outside that's used to preserve them, makes them a little less salty, more flavorful. Just want to give them a rough chop. If you didn't process your chili bean paste like I did with the stick blender, you would do a rough chop right now with them. I would leave them towards the very end because it will stain your chopping board and potentially get on the other stuff. But at the very end, we'll chop the beef because cross-contamination. For real, authentic Mapo tofu always has to be beef. Just has to be beef. That's how it's made. A Chinese chef will always hand mince their beef with a knife. Makes for the best texture as opposed to stuff that is pressed and ground that you can get at the store. You'll want to use a nice fatty cut because that will make for the most flavor. For the entire portion of Mapo tofu, we're only using about 85 grams or around 3 ounces of beef. That's not even a quarter pound. Mapo tofu, as is the name, is very much tofu forward, and the beef almost acts as more of a seasoning. This way you get kind of larger pieces of the meat and it just makes for better texture. So that's the texture we're looking for. You see what I mean about trying to make actual proper fully authentic Mapo tofu not being super realistic? For Tuesday night, I'm not gonna be hand chopping meat like this, to be honest. All right, restaurant style Mapo tofu, let's go. Okay, so very first step, you're supposed to simmer the tofu. To about 1 inch of simmering water, we'll add salt. To our lightly salted water, gently add in our tofu. We want the water hot, but just barely simmering. If you boil tofu too aggressively, it will create a honeycomb texture inside, which we don't really want. And we only really want to do this for about a minute or so. Supposedly simmering will eliminate some of that beany flavor and firm up the tofu. After about a minute or so, we can remove our tofu from the water. And the next thing for authentic Mapo tofu is you gotta use rapeseed oil. That is the cooking oil that's always used in South Central Chinese cuisine. Pretty special because it's actually kind of a more ancestral strain of what later became canola oil. It's usually cold pressed, retains a lot more of the flavor. If we're going for fully authentic Mapo tofu, you gotta use rapeseed. And okay, so same pot, dump the water out. We'll put it on high heat and get it smoking hot so that we can put the oil in and that'll make our stainless non-stick. Put some water on it. See if the water evaporates like that. It's not hot enough. See that? The water that we added isn't immediately evaporating now. It's dancing around. Get rid of the water before you add the oil because it will splatter like crazy. And once it's hot enough, you can turn the temperature down to about medium. And we'll go in with a 1/2 cup of rapeseed oil. Yeah, you heard right, a 1/2 cup of oil. That is a lot, but that's just how Mapo tofu is made. If we're doing restaurant authentic version, just swirl the oil around to coat the entire pan. With rapeseed oil, you want to get it up to a smoking point first, otherwise it'll be really bitter. Oh, another thing, to have handy, have a splatter guard. It'll just make things a little easier. So, our oil is smoking now. I'm gonna turn the heat down. The nice thing about Mapo tofu is that it doesn't need to be made at a super high heat, and you don't need a wok for it. You actually want to cook the beef and the chili paste kind of slowly so that you don't burn it. So we'll go in with our beef. Sitting at about a medium heat, we want to slowly cook this beef in the oil to dry out the moisture and turn it pretty crispy. See how the beef is getting nice and browned and dried and crispy feeling? Turn the temperature down and we will add in our chili bean paste. 2 tablespoons of chili bean paste. So for the restaurant version, I'm actually gonna go in with just the red, younger chili bean paste because that is what they would use at a restaurant. It'll make for the best color, though not necessarily the best flavor. Make sure the temperature is quite low, otherwise you will scorch your chili bean paste. And you want to keep it moving, otherwise it will stick and burn to the bottom. And what we're looking for is to draw out the color and flavor of the chili bean paste and infuse the oil with it. So once your oil turns a nice red color, you know we're ready to move on. So just cook it nicely and thoughtfully and slowly, crisping up the beef and the chili bean paste for about 2 minutes. From the gentle sizzling that's going on, I hope you can tell that my temperature is not really high at all, at about a medium low right now. About a minute later, our oil is nice and red, and I can smell kind of like a nuttiness and a chili flavor going on. Next 3 ingredients will go in now. So it'll be our fermented black beans, nicely chopped, minced garlic, some Sichuanese chili flake, as much as you want in terms of adjusting the heat. I'm using a tablespoon. This will bring color and heat and also just a different expression of chili flavor. Again, make sure we're at quite a low heat so that our garlic can crisp up without burning. And we don't want to burn our powdered chili flake as well. So just cook these together for about a minute or 2. You'll know when it's ready when you can really begin to smell the garlic. Oh, it smells so good. So this is the texture that we're looking for. Super crisp. Now we'll go in with about a 2/3 cup of stock. I have chicken stock right here, but you can use whatever stock you have on hand. Pork, beef, whatever. Chicken stock is nice for this. Bring this to a simmer and we'll add in our tofu. Once the tofu is in, we don't want to stir it carelessly, so just use the back of the spatula to kind of nudge things around. The tofu might stick to itself a little bit after being blanched. Make sure that the tofu gets in the liquid. With the amount of stock, we definitely do not want to cover and submerge the tofu completely. Mapo tofu is kind of what I would call a semi-soupy braise. You want enough of a sauce to coat the tofu and have a little bit pooling, but it isn't meant to be a soup. Like the tofu shouldn't be swimming in sauce at all. And see, this nice gentle simmer is exactly what we want. At this point, we only really want to stew the tofu for about 3 to 5 minutes. Remember, tofu's already cooked. We just want it to kind of absorb some of the flavors of the sauce. A large part of this sauce is actually the oil. We used a full half cup of oil and we'll make it really super freaking delicious because oil carries flavor, but like it's also kind of a lot. Pretty much the braising portion is done. So quick, so simple, so easy. And now we want to thicken the sauce. So the goal of Mapo tofu is to have the sauce just thick enough to be clinging to the tofu, but not so thick that it's gummy or clumpy at all. And to achieve this, restaurants in Sichuan classically use potato starch. So right here I have about 1.5 teaspoons of potato starch mixed with a tablespoon of water. Make sure that it's regular potato starch, not sweet potato starch. That's completely different. Potato starch is used in Sichuanese cooking for thickening sauces because it just creates a slightly better texture. We'll want to slowly drizzle this potato starch slurry in. Before using, just give it a stir. The starch will sink down to the bottom. Medium heat still, and we'll slowly drizzle the starch. It's good to not add all of it at once, just in case it over thickens, right? So this way, by adding it in portions, we'll be able to control the thickening of the sauce. Okay, so here, it's still too soupy. So we'll need to thicken it just a little bit more. And remember, we're just only pushing with the back of the spatula, not stirring. That will break up your tofu too much. After each addition of the starch slurry, just stir it around and cook it a little bit to give the starch a chance to thicken. So we didn't end up using the full amount of the slurry, and that will just depend on, you know, like how much water evaporated, how much stock you added. In traditional Mapo tofu, the sauce kind of has like 2 phases. There's more of the oil phase, which is actually the large proportion of the sauce, and then there's the non-oil phase. And with the non-oil phase, we just want it to be kind of like just a saucy texture. At this point, we can turn off the heat and we'll throw in chopped scallion. This will just get folded in and will wilt with the residual heat. And then also, this is to taste based on how much you like Sichuan peppercorn. I like it quite a lot, so I'm doing about 1 teaspoon. And then later on top, we'll actually garnish it after serving. We add the Sichuan peppercorn right at the very end because we want to preserve the fruity aromatic compounds in the Sichuan peppercorn. Oh, it smells so good. I'm gonna give it a taste. And remember, for traditional Mapo Tofu, it's gonna be on the salty side because it's meant to be eaten with rice. Ooh, right, I forgot. Okay, last little touch of seasoning is a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. This will lift that like really intense saltiness, just balance things out a little bit. See how the meat sauce is clinging to the tofu? The rest of that sauce, that's just pure oil. To serve Mapo Tofu, you want to serve it in a dish that has enough depth to hold on to the sauce because you don't want to spread it out too much. Mapo Tofu should stay hot in terms of temperature to go with the rice, but you also don't want a super deep bowl because Mapo Tofu doesn't actually have that much sauce to it. A shallow bowl plate hybrid like this is perfect. This way, we'll get the ultimate fresh expression of that Sichuan peppercorn flavor. The literal heat from the tofu will waft up and get into the nostrils of whoever's eating them. So you see like this oil slick effect that you get around the outside? This is what a traditional Mapo Tofu should look like. The sauce should cling to the tofu itself, but what is visible around the tofu should pretty much only be oil. Think about all of those flavors that we slowly sizzled into the oil. This is the stuff that will soak into the rice that you're gonna eat it with and taste so good. I have some rice dished up. You gotta have Mapo Tofu with rice. I don't know if I can think of much else that goes better with rice than Mapo Tofu, to be quite honest. You gotta get some of that oil, drizzle it on with the tofu. Oh, look at that. I don't know if you could hear that, but my stomach literally just growled. Oh my gosh, okay, I can't wait. Let's dive into this, the restaurant version of Mapo Tofu. It's flavorful, all right. Umami from the chili bean paste and also the fermented black beans. You really get that kick, almost floral note from the Sichuan peppercorn. Like it's a little citrusy, a little resinous, but in your mouth, it creates that delightful tingle that is so characteristic of Sichuan peppercorn. It is a ton of oil in there, but as we all know, fat carries flavor, and the oil just soaks into every grain of the rice. Next time you're at an authentic Sichuanese restaurant, you gotta order this. Or I guess, I mean, now with this video, you could just make it at home. I love how the beef retains its crisp. There isn't so much water. Oil doesn't tend to like sog things out. Such a nice contrast with the tofu. Woo! Yeah. Oh, a little hit of spice. The tip of my tongue is numb, so are my lips. And that's exactly what you should be feeling from a good Mapo Tofu. Woo! Spicy. All right, Mapo Tofu, Sheldo style. So I completely skipped the simmering tofu step because in my opinion, with modern tofu, there's no point in trying to leach out any beany flavors. Supposedly it also firms up the tofu, but like I'm not convinced that's really a thing. So being able to cut out that step altogether is a-okay in my book. High heat, steel pan, heat it up until the water skips across it. And that's a sign that our pot is hot enough. Compared to our traditional version, I'm gonna use much less oil. Turn the temperature down a little to medium, just 2 tablespoons of a neutral cooking oil. It can be, I mean, pretty much whatever you would use for cooking that has a decently high smoke point. Today, I got some rice bran oil, canola, sunflower, peanut, any of those will work. Avocado will work perfectly. So once the oil is shimmering, we don't want it to smoke too much. Go in directly with our beef. And I'm gonna use much more beef compared to the traditional recipe. So this is a pound of beef right here. You can go up to a half, about a third is probably perfect. Whatever. Let's just do a ½ pound of meat in there. Might as well. See how the beef doesn't stick? That's because we heated our pan hot enough, added the oil in and swirled it to coat. I'm using ground beef from the store, Makes it super easy. We don't have to mince it by hand. And I'm using regular ground beef, which has a slightly higher percentage of fat in it, because that will add nice flavor. You can use up to lean ground beef. I wouldn't use extra lean though. Oh yeah, speaking of skipping the simmering step, with making Mapo Tofu at home, I actually skip using a cutting board altogether. With the ground beef, we don't have to use a cutting board. Use scissors to snip our scallion right in. Chili bean paste is pre-processed already, so it doesn't need to be chopped. And I also skip the black bean. The fermented black bean is nice in terms of adding just depth, but we can kind of replicate it by adding in just a little bit of soy sauce. This is much more beef compared to the classic, where the beef is kind of more acting as a seasoning. Here, I just like a meatier stew. I'm using beef today, and that is what's classic for Mapo Tofu, but feel free to use ground pork. I probably wouldn't use something like ground turkey, because in terms of texture, I don't know, ground beef is so easy to find. So unless you're avoiding it for religious or health reasons or whatever, ground beef is still the best. We want to keep a medium to medium low-ish heat and slowly crisp up our beef. In lieu of the black beans, to our sizzling beef, I'm gonna add a teaspoon of soy sauce. I like to add it in right now, straight to the beef. Once the beef crisps, it'll actually further caramelize our soy sauce a little bit, creating more depth of flavor. I feel like a lot of people, when they think Chinese cooking, they think stir frying, wok, tossing, super high heat, but not all dishes are like that, and Mapo Tofu is exactly one of those dishes. We want to keep things nice, slow, and gentle. Beef is nicely browned now. With this much beef, we don't actually want to crisp it as much as with the restaurant version. It will dry it out too much and give it an unpleasant texture. And so right about now, we are, oh my gosh, 2 tablespoons of chili bean paste, 1 tablespoon of the fresher red oil one, and then 1 tablespoon of the darker one. This will give us the best of both worlds, both color and flavor. Okay, make sure the heat is down nice and low. Because we used regular ground beef, a lot of the fat has rendered out of the beef. It'll give us enough oil to really cook our chili bean paste nicely. Keep things moving in the pan because the chili bean paste will start to stick. Cook it on medium-low heat for about 2 minutes or so until the oil starts turning red from the bean paste. Perfect temperature here. It's like lightly simmering, but not splattering and going all crazy. I'm starting to smell like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just the fried chili bean paste smell. Once the smell changes, then we can go in with our chili powder and our garlic. Instead of mincing garlic, remember we are skipping the cutting board altogether. I just use my freezer garlic that I bought and peeled, blitzed up in a food processor, flattened it, broke it off into pieces. Super convenient. Probably should have taken it out ahead of time so that it could thaw a little bit. Garlic has so much sugar in it, it never freezes fully solid, so it's pretty easy to just break up with your spatula. To chase the garlic, we'll add in our chili powder, or chili flake. This is about 1.5 teaspoons, which is half the amount that I used in the restaurant version. I'm using a Sichuanese chili flake, but you could sub it with whatever chili flake you have on hand. It's almost more about the flavor of the chili, less about the spice. Good substitutes are gochugaru or Korean chili flake, or maybe something like Aleppo chili, or even just a standard Italian chili flake will work just fine. So keep those moving, bloom the chili powder in the oil, cook our garlic. This will only take about a minute or 2. I can begin to smell the garlic now, just like with our restaurant version. Look how nice and browned that is, and crisp. And then instead of stock, I just use water plus some chicken bouillon powder. Honestly, if you're buying chicken stock, you're just buying rehydrated chicken bouillon anyway, so may as well not pay for cartons of water to be shipped and instead just buy the powder. So I have about a cup of water here and a teaspoon of chicken bouillon. Bouillon, or is it bouillon? How are we supposed to pronounce that? It's a French word, right? Once the water is in, make sure to scrape the fond off of the bottom of the pot. Because we didn't use nearly as much oil in this version, you'll develop a really good fond. Like that's all flavor in there. So make sure to scrape it all up so it's incorporated into our sauce. Okay, once the water is in, we can turn the temperature up, bring the sauce to a simmer before adding in the tofu. Sauce is simmering and we can go in with our tofu. We are skipping the cutting board altogether. So this is how I cut tofu in. This is how my grandma cut tofu. This is how my mom cut tofu. This is how I grew up watching them do it. But if you feel like you're gonna cut your fingers off, obviously don't do that, please. And if you do, I don't know, it's not my fault, don't sue me. See how like this is the actual perfect size? I don't know what happened when I was trying to cut the tofu on the cutting board. I'm just not used to doing that, I guess. So I made the tofu is way too big, like this. This is the perfect size that we're looking for. Is that an inch? I feel like that's less than an inch. It's like 3/4 inch max. Now that the tofu is in, no more stirring, just gently nudge and push using the back of the spatula. I feel like too much of the water actually ended up boiling off while I was talking. So I'm gonna add a little more water. For my version, I like my Mapo Tofu to be quite saucy because the sauces are the best part. And that's what I want to have with my rice. This is significantly saucier than the traditional version, but it shouldn't be soupy. So we only want the water to come up about halfway over the tofu. It shouldn't be completely submerged because then you're making a different dish. Mapo Tofu is semi-saucy, semi-stew, semi-saucy? Half saucy, a semi-stew. So not too much liquid. That's the nice thing about Mapo Tofu as well. It comes together so quickly because it's tofu, it's fully cooked. It doesn't really need very much time to braise at all. Like we're not trying to break down connective tissue. Just needs about 3 to 5 minutes for the tofu to soak up some of the sauce. And plus we thicken the sauce so it actually clings to the tofu anyway. Yeah, I don't even set a timer or anything. I kind of just go by feel. Once I get impatient, I call it a day. And right about now, I'm impatient. So I declare that this is now cooked enough. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to thicken it, do some final seasoning, and then add in the scallion to wilt. Then finish it with the Sichuan peppercorn and we're done. This is a tablespoon of cornstarch stirred into 2 tablespoons of water. Right before using, just stir it all up because the starch will sink to the bottom. Make sure your heat is on at least medium because we'll need to cook the starch in order for it to properly thicken. Just like with the other one, we'll add the starch in small increments just so we can fully gauge just how thick we want the sauce to be. Even with the starch, we don't want to stir, just push it around. Give it like 30 seconds so that the starch properly thickens before gauging whether or not to add more starch. Just a little more and it will be perfect. Oh yeah, baby. When we push and it kind of like takes a while for the sauce to fill back in, that means the sauce is viscous enough. See how it's clinging to the tofu now? Right about here is absolutely perfect. Okay, final seasoning. Instead of the sugar that we use in the traditional version, I like to use an ingredient that adds a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of acidity to kind of just pick things up. What's the perfect ingredient for that? Well, ketchup. I know some people get super weird about using ketchup in cooking, but like, why? It's a prepared tomato product that has been stewed, has sugar, vinegar, and a little bit of spices. And it's perfect. Like, why would you not use it? I'm gonna go in with just about a teaspoon of ketchup. Tomato goes perfectly with beef, so it'll just enhance the umami. The vinegar and the acidity just lifts up the savoriness and extreme saltiness of the dish, and a little bit of sweetness also helps to balance the saltiness. Oh, look at that. Do you see the sauce and how it's perfectly clinging? Instead of that two-phase oil and sauce kind of texture you get in the traditional one, here we have a cohesive kind of meaty bolognese almost surrounding the tofu. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. All right, let's finish off with our Sichuan peppercorn. I'm gonna use a teaspoon and a half. We'll grab scissors and just snip our scallion right in this way. We don't have to use a cutting board whatsoever. Gently stir so that the residual heat will wilt our scallion just a little bit. Doesn't that just look so good? Honestly, bolognese is a pretty good analogy. Tofu wrapped in a luscious kind of bolognese texture, for lack of a better way to put it. Give it a final taste so we can adjust for seasoning if we need to. No need. It is absolutely perfect. Can you tell at all that there's ketchup in there? No, obviously not. Touch of sweetness and that touch of acidity just lifts things up so that it's not just straight salt, savory umami. Oh my gosh, that's so good. All right, we can dish this up. First of all, let's just appreciate how good that looks. The sauce is cohesive and meaty and then we will finish with the traditional dusting of Sichuan peppercorn. You can change the amount of peppercorn you use based on how much you like it. If you're not really used to the numbing flavor, then use less. I love this shit, so do like to use quite a lot. All right, there you go. Here is my version of Mapo Tofu. As you can see, doesn't have nearly the same amount of oil, but has all the flavor. Super easy to make. We did it completely without using a cutting board. Came together in less than 15 minutes. Let's give this Mapo Tofu a taste. Oh, that's a big bite. Huh. It truly does hit all of the same points. You have the nose of the Sichuan peppercorn, spicy, umami, with the softness of the tofu, the crispness of the beef. Except it's just not quite so oily anymore. We still have enough fat, more than enough flavor, but it's like this luscious sauce that really coats the rice, right? Really that kind of like ragu bolognese texture to the meat. Just meat and tofu encased in a luscious, luscious sauce. So good with rice. Slightly different, but just as delicious. And so much easier to make for a Tuesday night. This version doesn't taste quite as salty. There's just more of the sauce to go around. So it like diluted the salt a little bit. And that subtle touch of ketchup keeps it from being one note. Ooh. My tongue and lips are numb, which is perfect. That's the way it should be. But of course, if you're not used to that Sichuan peppercorn sensation or don't like the flavor, you can always dial it back. But don't even consider skipping it altogether. If you don't have Sichuan peppercorn, just make something else. Because like, you gotta have it in there. It's part of the flavor. Trying to make Mapo Tofu without Sichuan peppercorn would be like trying to make margarita pizza without basil. It's a fundamental ingredient. So you can sub the chili bean paste, but don't try to sub the Sichuan peppercorn. All right, before I get myself some more rice and devour the rest of this tofu, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending time with me in my kitchen. I hope you learned a thing or two about Mapo Tofu. For the full written instructions and ingredient amounts for both the restaurant version and my version of Mapo Tofu, go down to the description. While you're down there, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, all of those good things. I would love to hear from you so very much. And yeah, I'll see you again very soon. Bye.